Like the third in a string of jewels along this coral sea, Bali stands as the cornerstone of Indonesian beauty. They call it the island of the gods. Whereas most of Indonesia's 190 million people are Muslim, Bali is predominantly Hindu. Even the monkeys are religious, or at least they look as if they are worshipping. They worship, and they worship some more.
And these are the nice ones.
Tourists from around the globe gather here to see the monkey temple and its inhabitants. If they look closely, they can see typical primate behavior. These two are grooming each other. It is social behavior that may have something to do with friendship or kinship. These two may even be sisters. As in all the animal kingdom, there is a hierarchy. Ken Gould, a specialist in reproductive biology, shows us how it works.
If I give a peanut to her, the other one may come up after it.
Hello.
Some Balinese take great pleasure in watching animal hierarchy at work. Cockfighting is a big business in Bali. Although the government outlawed it some years ago to protect the animals, black markets being what they are, a salesman trading these roosters with sharpened claws can scratch out a small fortune in the local market.
16 for 2. Oh, good price at 20. Good for you. 20. Last price. Yeah, last price.
John Coe and Ken Gould aren't looking for roosters, but they are negotiating for flutes, hand-carved in Bali.
Okay, 18.
Nice, do you think 18? Yeah. Okay.
We got it, 18.
Okay.
Okay, now pay up.
Now pay up.
All that for a few cents difference. 1,800 rupiah is actually just more than $1 US. Bali is called the Island of the Gods, and there are temples everywhere to attest to this. From private family sanctuaries in every village to the breathtaking Tanah Lot, which has inspired artists and photographers. Temples are also sometimes the scenes of morality plays that show violent battle between the forces of good and evil. And as in nature, the extremes of good and evil are always animals. While the Balinese are fascinated with animals, tourists to this exotic island are fascinated with the Balinese. Bali is perhaps the best known of the more than 13,000 islands that make up Indonesia. Bali today is a delicate balance between culture and economy. Haircuts on the beach are still a couple of dollars. 50 cents will get you a massage, all under the watchful eye of the gods. We prefer to linger on the other image of Bali, of tropical birds nesting in the palms, a fisherman casting into the surf, of a farmer, his sweet-smelling clove cigarette dangling from his lips, watching his cows in the early morning sun, or a monkey with child, poised on a temple wall.
Easy, forward.
Where's your water stop?
We passed it by. It was just a trickle. The spring was pretty much dried out. This would have taken about an hour to fill with large water bottles. So decided to
The
scrap
size of the leaves on these vines.
There's a side stream up just above camp, which is about just a few hundred meters.
As we made our way downstream to search for the orangutans, the heat grew more intense. Possessed by the demon that inhabits everyone who crosses the equator, we found the coolest waterfall around. Some of us climbed halfway up and jumped. Even in our tropical madness, one dark paradox became apparent. We were swimming freely in water that just 20 years ago would have been deadly. You see, once the Alas River was home to some of the largest reptiles ever to live on Earth. man-eating crocodiles. 20 years ago, the Alas may have looked like this, in its eddies. Calm, peaceful, glass-like, except for a few rock-like bumps breaking through. Suddenly, an unwary duck flies into the pool. You can hear the bones crunch as it sets its sizable teeth into the hapless bird. But these reptiles are being raised by crocodile farmers on the outskirts of Medan, Sumatra's capital city. For in some parts of the wild, you see, they've been poached into near extinction. The government hopes that by allowing farmers to raise and sell crocodiles, they can satisfy commercial demand for the reptiles and combat poaching in the wild. We wondered if the red ape, for which we had come halfway around the world, had suffered the same fate as the crocodile, and if in fact the man of the forest had become a man of the past.
When we come back, we'll take you to see something most of us never see in our lifetimes, great apes in the wild. You are watching a Channel 2 special.
After 3 days on the river searching for the red ape, we realized we'd have to leave our boats and get into the jungle to see what we'd come so far to see.
Conservation Center. That's where the Indonesian government takes orangutans, illegally acquired by the local people as pets, and reintroduces them to the wilderness. Years ago, it was standard practice for animal dealers to acquire baby orangutans by killing their mothers. Ironically, many of these babies were then sent to zoos all over the world.
Today, there are still people in Indonesia who illegally obtain primates of all kinds. Orangutans make popular pets, and the government has had to confiscate these animals wherever they locate them. More than 100 animals have been rehabilitated since the program began 20 years ago. That may not seem like many, but when you consider that by some estimates there are only 3,000 to 5,000 orangutans left in Sumatra, it is a significant percentage.
In 15 years of studying these animals, I had never seen an orangutan in the wild. I was like an expectant father, waiting for my first child to arrive, and it did. High in the trees above us, a large orangutan was swinging from the limbs in our direction. Another watched us from a distance. They were barely visible against the sun, so low in the sky, but they were determined to gather, as they do every day at this time, at the same spot in the jungle, for food. These rangers are reintroducing the orangutans to the wild by carefully weaning them from both domestic food and human contact. Notice how they take great care not to look the orangutans in the eye or make any contact with them, beyond serving food. No smiling, no recognition, no touching. They will gradually decrease the amount of food and human contact until the orangutans learn how to forage through the jungle themselves. Then the feeding is cut off, and the reintroduction is complete.
It is sometimes difficult to watch when the feeding is over and the rangers return to camp. The orangutans are left up on their feeding platform with sad faces.
Well, the animal is being sent out into the wild, so it has to break the bond with human beings. It's been a captive in a human home for too long, so they have to learn to be orangutans, and this is part of the process, the transition from living in a home to living in the wild. How do you feel when you see one of these guys? You've had him here for 4 or 5 years, and he's lived here, and you've taken care of him. When he goes off and you don't see him again, how do you feel? How does that make you feel?
And I'm very happy.
Yeah?
If they go to the forest,
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because they're success.
Because you've made success. Yeah, that's good. You're doing a wonderful job saving orangutans for the forest, and I compliment you. I congratulate you as he's biting your finger off.
We were also doing our part for continuing research into the survival of orangutans. Through a grant from Zoo Atlanta, 2 scientists from Seattle began some extraordinary field work while we were there.
Hey, Harmony, could you shake that tray a little?
Harmony Taylor Frazier and Dr. William Carish of the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle were tracking orangutans.
And then there's a wild one up there.
Their mission, to shoot a specially prepared dart into the side of the orangutan. Bill has an orangutan in his sights, but he won't fire until the animal turns around. You don't want to harm the orangutan. That's the whole point of this process in the first place.
What's unique about this project is that the only way this work could ever be done before was to anesthetize the animals and draw blood. And with our biopsy dart, we don't have to do that. It would be impossible to try to anesthetize orangutans in trees. They drop out and injure themselves. So that's why this project's different than what's been done before.
Like a tiny cookie cutter, it will remove a small piece of skin from its back. Later, they will examine the chromosomal makeup of the specimen to determine which subspecies of orangutan the animal belongs to.
This important research will help scientists to understand which orangutans they can reintroduce to the wild and where, and help contribute to the survival of the species.
When we come back, we'll take you to a couple of zoos that are among the best in the world in preserving...
Stand again. This has been my home for 3 days. You see those blood stains on the wall? That's my blood.
Listen.
Hear those gibbons? That's why we're here.
"3 days on the river and you'll do anything for a bath."
Hold your breath and then catch your breath in between the waves. The other thing is when you get right out to this point here, you can see that start to ease up a little bit, then start your swim in to shore. If you go out too far, it's a lot of work to get back in.
While some of us were bathing, others were making another breakfast of nasi goreng, a local mash of eggs and rice, and fried rice patties, sort of an Indonesian potato chip. We were hungry enough to eat just about anything that was served to us on the river. And we entertained ourselves with yet another more rousing rendition of Terry Maple's theme song.
Orangutan, orangutan, won't you marry me? Orangutan, orangutan, beneath the banyan tree.
Hey,
We were all beginning to understand why zoos can sometimes be the most comfortable place to observe wildlife. This fact was never more true than when we visited 2 of the world's better zoos.
The Zurich Zoo stands out as being among the best in the world in keeping their animals active. Look at these orangutans. The former director of the zoo, Dr. Heine Hediger, came up with a concept called habitat enrichment, dedicated to the notion that if animals are active, they're happy.
what kinds of things do you put in there to encourage them to be more active?
I put in anything we can. Paper, for instance.
Yeah.
Straw, branches, other favorite.
1946, the effect was widely publicized by a Japanese newspaper in the Midwest. It read, "Stimulated by such news, Nikkei societies in many American cities established Japan relief committees, one after another, that will add up to 36 or more. And in California, where the Nikkei population was beginning to return from relocation camps, there was also a call to send relief supplies to Japan. Shortly after the meeting in New York, on October 24, 1945, a group of Nikkei people in Los Angeles formed an organization called the Southern California Relief Organization for Displaced People in Japan. That is in your list, too. In November 1945, in San Francisco, a meeting to discuss relief for the whole land was held. And the Association for the Relief of Displaced People in Japan was formed in the following year. One book titled Kikan Fukoshi, The History of Returned People and Re-establishment, published by Nichibei Times in San Francisco, relates how the Nikkei who had just returned from the relocation camps and were still struggling to establish themselves stood up to help Japanese in Japan as follows. And I'm going to read the whole passage, though it is a bit too long. It is a bit long, as this describes the situation in Seattle as well. An original passage was in Japanese and translation is mine, so I'm to be blamed if there's something wrong, okay? It was immediately after the war in the Pacific when we were released from our isolated lives in relocation camps and returned to the cities on the West Coast. Every city was experiencing an extreme shortage of houses to rent. Those Nikkei people who returned could find literally no houses to live in. Some of them were lucky enough to rent a room in the White Houses. Others had to sleep in the single beds arranged in rows in the basements or halls in the so-called hostels, newly prepared in church meeting halls. They were exactly like displaced people. To them, in such a situation, news describing the situation in Japan was brought little by little by military people staying in Japan as the occupation army or by newspaper correspondents. They all depicted the desperate situation of poverty-stricken people in Japan immediately after Japan surrendered. Although we experienced isolated lives in the camps, deprived of our freedom, we never experienced a lack of food and clothes. War victims in our homeland, Japan, on the other hand, have lost their houses and are unable to obtain even bread, we hear. We, their blood relatives, cannot bear to see their difficulties. We gathered together and looked for ways to save them from such a situation. Then we started to discuss what we could do. Our desire to give a helping hand gradually grew. So that was the feeling that they shared. And in Seattle in particular, an organization called Seihokubu Nihon Nanmin Kyusai Kai. Well, it is listed at the 7th from the top in your list. You have. This organization was organized toward the end of 1945. The Nikkei volunteers collected, as you saw in the pictures, used clothes, washed, mended them, and packed and shipped them to Rara. The record gives the name who organized the relief activities was Mrs. Katsuno Mihara, Mrs. Mihara, no, who was Mr. Mihara, her husband, also was quite active, and he was awarded with Kunsho from the Japanese government for his activities. The Seattle organization also raised over $36,000 to be sent to Japan through RARA by September 1948. The Hokubei Hochi, a Japanese language newspaper which is celebrating its 60th anniversary of publication this year, carried an article already in 1947 on a message of appreciation for the gifts from Seattle sent by the chair. The message was sent by the chair of the RARA Central Committee. So you can see the Japanese people were already aware of the support, the help came from Seattle too. So you can see it was the Nikkei's conscientious sense of moral obligation to help Japanese in such a situation that moved them, as they, reflecting upon their own situation, considered themselves rather fortunate as they had enough to eat and had something to share for others. So they wanted to help Japanese in Japan, even if they had to share a meal with others and spare something from a small stipend. And it is quite interesting to note that this activity was, for these Nikkei, a way of repaying the contributions they had received from Japan during their internment. The record says that the Nikkei recollected how moved and touched they had been by such comfort articles as medicine, books, toys, as well as shoyu and miso sent by their countrymen, and that they recollected that warm kindness Japanese people who were now destitute had shown to Nikkei people whose food, clothing, and housing were secured. With such memories, they could not help but willingly share what they had with those living in poverty in Japan. So, the conclusion, before I lose my voice. In addition to sending relief supplies through RARA, many Nikkei sent goods from the United States to friends and relatives in Japan. Many Issei women whom I interviewed in the 1980s and 1990s on the West Coast recollected their own experiences of doing so. In the case of one woman in Auckland, her relatives still show their appreciation to her relatives in Japan, okay? Saying, our children were raised by the powdered milk that you sent us. Another woman living in San Francisco engaged in farming while she was in Utah on temporary release from the camp in 1946, started to send packages to her relatives in Japan as soon as permission to send packages to Japan was issued. And she told me, I asked children to get cardboard boxes thrown out in the backyard of the market. As we, too, were short of sugar, we saved 1 spoonful of sugar for coffee or cocoa every morning or for cooking, and stored it in a bottle till the bottle was filled to the neck. And then we sent it in small boxes. She recollects that she decided to send one of her 2 monthly unemployment checks to 3 of her relatives in Japan, which must have been about $7 each family. And it gave her pleasure to know how her efforts were appreciated by them. And she proudly told me that each family sent letters of appreciation to the aunt in America. In addition to the relief efforts of Nikkei through RARA and mailing of individual packages, there were other cases in which those who were stationed in Japan helped the Japanese. For example, a Hawaii-born Nisei who was stationed in Sasebo in Kyushu as an intelligence agent immediately after the war came to know the children in the neighborhood and found them suffering from malnutrition and small for their ages. So he recollects, I gave them all the sweets and other stuff that I had. The children appreciated it and made efforts to repay him. A boy brought him a pearl he found at the shore. Another offered to get his mother to do his laundry. And this kind of exchange lasted for a month when he stayed in Sasebo. And before he left Sasebo, he gave this boy a winter blanket provided by the military. Later, when he was about to leave Sasebo on that particular day, the boy came and showed him a pair of mittens that his mother had made out of that blanket. Another Hawaii-born Nisei, who also stayed in Japan as an intelligence agent, visited his parents who had returned from Hawaii, and he found that they were living in the shabby house in extreme poverty. And he tried to give his savings to his mother for the house to be repaired. His mother insisted that she could not accept it because it was special treatment for her, only for her, and suggested to him that he should utilize the money for the sake of all the people in Japan. Later, he was stationed in Maizuru, where he and his colleagues proceeded with a plan to plant cherry trees there. The reason, he explained, was that he could not forget how impressive the beautiful cherry blossoms in a burned field were upon his first arrival in Japan. Now, 50 years later, the cherry trees are called aloha trees and are considered proof of friendship between Hawaii and Japan. And this was another contribution of Nisei to Japan immediately after the war. So although many Nikkei in the United States felt ashamed and distanced themselves from anything Japanese, some were more concerned about the plight of the Japanese in Japan than with their own condition. Those people came forward as members of the Nikkei community in order to help those whom they regard as compatriots or blood brothers. They looked for ways to assist them and found that they could do so through RARA. It had only been a few years since those same Nikkei, many of whom were citizens of the United States, had been classified as enemy aliens and removed from their homes and interned in camps. There were even some Nisei who were willing to help Japanese in Japan, the country of their parents, even as others felt stigmatized by their ties to Japan. Some Nisei were included among the 20 members of the preliminary committee for the New York Japanese-American Committee for Japanese Relief. Those who sent packages individually to their relatives in Japan may have done so out of individual motivation rather than as a collective effort on behalf of Japan. RARA activities, however, incorporated both individual motivations and compassion toward the Japanese as a whole. Naturally, I do not mean to suggest that the only motivation for these Nisei to participate in general relief activities was their personal ties to Japan. Clearly, they could have chosen to give humanitarian aid to European people in order to avoid demonstrating their ties to Japan. It is true that until the 1970s, when the redress movement was launched, some Nisei felt that they had a negative identity as Nikkei and remained silent about their experience. At the same time, however, as can be seen in the description of RARA relief supplies and in the examples of those who privately sent relief packages to Japan, and examples of those who are stationed in Japan and gave helping hands to needy children, there were Nikkei who regarded ties to Japan as very important, even when they themselves were going through very difficult times. And this fact is undeniable. Thank you very much.
Towards the end, you said something about during the time when Japanese Americans were interned, that some of their family were sending aid to them here in the United States.
Right.
That was something I was unaware of. Could you say a little bit more about that, please?
Oh, during the war, probably through the Japanese government, some Japanese people sent the care packages or comfort packages to those people in the camps. And particularly the miso and soy sauce were very much welcomed, appreciated. That's what I heard. Many records say, but the how and the who exactly, I don't really know. But so many records said on the side of the Japanese Americans, they really appreciated the miso and soy sauce. Maybe some of you may know or experienced receiving those goods. No?
I heard, like I read the newspaper, Japanese government pay back for about Lala relief. Is that true?
What do you mean by payback? They had the appreciation.
Like we pay back 返済したっていうニュースを見たんですけど。
They paid back?
Yeah. Is it true or not?
To the American government?
The Japanese government?
Yeah, maybe, yes, but the Japanese government paid?
Paid to United States.
Like they felt they owed something to the American government?
Yeah, about...
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's maybe that is
as far as I remember, or from the records that I checked, I can say that the Japanese government showed the deep appreciation to the American government and the people in the United States in so many ways. Yes, in so many ways. But not the monetary compensation or monetary payment. Have you ever heard about it? Anybody? I don't think so. Thank you.